It's time for a quick shout out to some of our friends. The Old School Mini Bikes and Parts Facebook group. The Strictly Vintage Mini Bikes and Go-Karts Facebook group. The All About Mini Bikes Facebook page. Genuine New Old Stock Vintage Parts. The Vintage Snowmobile podcast. And the Muscle Car Show and Tell podcast. Ben Thomas is your independent AMSOIL dealer. Click the link in the description for your free AMSOIL catalog, or scan the QR code to earn the deepest discount by becoming a preferred customer. To advertise with Ben's Vintage Mini Bike podcast, the Vintage Snowmobile podcast, or the Muscle Car Show and Tell podcast, please reach out to Ben or Mike for more information. Details in the description of this video.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Vintage Mini Bike Lovers podcast. I'm really glad you could be here with us. I want to make sure that we're coming through loud and clear. So if you're watching and you can post a comment, let us know where you're watching from. We really do encourage participation throughout the show, so don't hesitate. If you like what you're seeing, let us know. Keep us posted on that. So we've got a nice show lined up for you today. We've got some videos from Jerry Mattox, and we're going to be talking about really the importance of mini bikes. As you know, the mission of the podcast really is to highlight the stories of the modern day vintage enthusiasts, the people that grew up with these bikes, and the youngsters that are getting exposed to them too. There's such a wide range of interests when it comes to mini bikes, and I know that if you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, you grew up on these mini bikes. And I think it's really important to highlight the stories. So we're going to really talk about that as the mission of the podcast. And of course, we're going to see some cool mini bikes along the way. So without further ado, let's watch the first video.
It was 1972, and I had already begged my parents for years to get a mini bike. I would have been happy with a pull start mini from Sears. But much to my surprise, they got me a Honda Z50, and my life changed instantly. You see, most kids have to go off to college, the military, or turn 18 before they really enjoy true independence. Not me. The second this 10-year-old kid kick-started that Honda, I had already moved out.
Oh, it was 1972. I was only a lad, but this is the bike that set me free. You guys have no idea how important the Honda Mini Trail 50, formerly known as the Z50, how much importance and how much of a role it played in America history. Not only just American history, every little boy on planet Earth wanted a Honda Mini Trail at one time or another. And this is the bike that built the entire nation as we know it of motorcycle racing today, if you're of that proper age bracket. I'm Jerry Mattox, and this is my first bike, and I'm going to give you a nice detailed tour of this bike, and we're going to discuss mini bikes. The 1972 Honda Z50 Mini Trail. What an awesome, amazing motorcycle for a kid to have back in those days. And you just have no idea how cool we thought this bike was. The thing had chrome fenders, a chrome pipe. In 1972, this particular bike come in candy gold or candy red, and it was all we could stand to have a bike like this. Headlight and tail light, you know what that meant? That meant we didn't come home until well after dark. This was our escape. This was our freedom. This was everything to me. This was my first motorcycle, and man, I got to tell you, you have no idea how important this bike was to just releasing me and being able to go down through the cul-de-sacs, the woods, neighborhood to neighborhood. This bike was freedom. But when we look at some of the details of this bike, 4-stroke motor, 3-speed gearbox. At the time, we felt that was really good suspension, a headlight and a tail light. It's all anybody ever need to be the coolest kid in town, and this is it. 1972 Honda Z50.
That was quite a video. Jerry Mattox is a former American Motorcyclists Association professional motocross racer whose career spanned throughout the glory days of the 1980s. Jerry has never stopped racing, however, and is currently a 5-time AMA and AHRMA historic racing motorcycle expert national champion in the 125 class. Jerry's said his Z50 Honda Mini Trail 1972 is what started it all. And without further ado, I introduce to you Jerry Mattox. Jerry, thank you for being here with us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having on your show. You know, most of the time we're talking motocross and heavy business and stuff like that, but my true love is mini bikes. So this is going to be a fantastic time to integrate with your fan base and just let them get to know me, because mini bikes are everything.
And I'd like to throw a quick plug out to my friend Joe Abadi at Vintage Motocross Q&A podcast. Joe does that every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. Eastern time. And Jerry, actually, you were introduced by Joe. I was telling Joe, I mean, Joe had a Muskin cat as a kid. And, you know, I was saying, hey, Joe, I mean, I think mini bikes really were the start of everything motocross, and everybody was involved in mini bikes at one point or another. I mean, maybe a few guys went right, to the big bikes, but I think this is where a lot of people cut their teeth. And, you know, I think this really fits right into the mission of my podcast. What did the mini bike mean to you, Jerry? I know you talked about a little bit in that video about freedom. Tell me about that.
Well, it's pretty simple. You know, I guess you'd say by today's standards, I started late in life. I was 10 years old, and I had begged my mom and dad for a mini bike for what seemed like an eternity before they finally got me one. And, you know, every kid in the neighborhood had a dirt bike but me. And I just saw how much fun they were having. And I just, you know, nobody in my family ever rode motorcycles or mini bikes. I was kind of the first one to actually take it on. And so when I finally got my Honda Z50, it was freedom. And it was just like, you know, being able to jump on that dirt bike and take off through the woods and escape the family and, you know, feel like a grown up, if you will, and just go be somebody on that thing, you know. And of course, you know, yeah, it parlayed into a motocross career for me, but not everybody parlays into the racing world, and not everybody that gets a mini bike goes into the dirt bike world. I mean, every road racer, every car enthusiast, anybody that's probably any sense of a gearhead of any kind had a mini bike. It might have been a pull start from Sears. It might have been an Indian. It might have been some bike that a Rupp, or any of those bikes that were a little predate me. But come on, look at Honda sales. How many Z50s you think we've sold in a lifetime? You know, it's fair to say most of the world knows about a Honda 50, and that was, you know, that was the genesis for my what now has been a very long time motorcycle career and just enthusiast period. So, yeah, you know,
the Honda bikes they're really captured the marketplace. I mean, obviously Honda really knew a little bit about marketing, right, and how to really catapult those sales. And when really Rupp went out of business and Speedway, it really was only a few manufacturers, you know, going into the 70s and late 70s. So then that's why I think really, why these are so important is to preserve this history and talk about them, you know. And if you look at any Facebook forum for Hondas, these mini bikes are just as hot now as they were when they were first introduced in the late 60s and 70s.
According to some of the prices, maybe even more so in demand than they were back then. It's a little creepy, but to your point on Honda, I wish I had some ads prepared for you, but in my mind, I remember all the Honda ads, and the Honda ads were always touting family. They would show a picture of a family out in a campsite somewhere, and one of them would have a QA50, and the other one would have an SL70, and another one might have an SL100. It showed that Honda had a bike for every person in your family. And, that's just their marketing genius to say that this is a family thing. And
that's so true.
Yeah. And so when I saw those ads, I didn't really care if my mom and dad got a mini bike, but I sure wanted one.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you were kind enough to send me a few more videos, so let's roll one more video, and we'll see a little bit more of your collection of Honda mini bikes.
Oh man, look at this 1971 Honda QA50. This thing is bad to the bone. As a kid, I wanted this bike. I begged mom and dad to get me a Honda 50 in 1971, and this was the bike that I was asking for and would have been perfectly content with. But you know what? It took me another year of begging and pleading to get a bike, and my mom and dad did me a solid. They come home with the gold Honda Z50 you see back here in the background. So I actually scored better. But this bike served a huge purpose in the Honda mini bike world. This bike was designed, believe it or not, mostly for adults. Not necessarily children. This thing can still pull a big man around, and it's pretty tall considering. Only has a 2-speed gearbox, not a tremendous amount of power, but with the stock muffler on it instead of my highly modified straight pipe, you could ride this thing through the neighborhood and not bother a soul. You wouldn't hear it anywhere. A lot of campers, RV enthusiasts, they would put these on the bumper of their motorhomes and take them and ride them around campgrounds. So, this made for a super awesome bike for that purpose. Now, did the kids buy them and thrash them out? Heck yeah, they did. They had a great time thrashing these bikes out. But you know what? Still not a Z50, but it played a very important transition into the Honda mini bike world. Now, granted, the Z50 was around before the QA50, and it was around long after the QA50. This bike ran from somewhere around 1970 to 1974, might have been the last year on it. But even still, this mini bike would have made a kid super happy under the Christmas tree, or it made a great guy, an adult, happy to run around the campgrounds and maybe even the farm on one of these things. And they did. We rode the wheels off these things. I present to you 1970-71 Honda QA50.
That's great, Jerry.
That bike is so cool. It's so cool. I watch my kid who's now turned 20, and I watch him jump on our QA50 and ride it around the yard, and more about him later. But I'm just trying to visualize. I jumped on a QA50 and rode my friend's QA50 when I was just barely 10. Here he is, 20 years old, 1,000 years later, by the way, and he's enjoying it just as much as we ever did.
Yeah.
Speaks volumes on having a mini bike, no matter what the brand is.
Timeless, right? That's
Timeless.
the enjoyment and the tide to our youth, and creating those new memories, those mini bike memories. Everyone really talks about it.
And I know we're kind of stuck on Hondas because I was stuck on Hondas, but the QA50, the Z50, that wasn't the only thing running around out there that was so cool. Suzuki made a product called the Trail Hopper, and the Suzuki Trail Hopper was a little 2-stroke 50. It had a weird body style on it, and but one day I had my Z50 and my neighbor had a Trail Hopper, and of course, we're going to drag race because that's what you do when you're kids on mini bikes. And we're just going to find out who's got the fastest mini bike in the world. I am sad to tell you that Trail Hopper wore me out. It was so much faster than my Honda 50,
right?
And that's what spawned us trying to hop these things up, and the next thing we're taking headlights off, we're putting number plates on them. We're calling up companies like Power Roll and trying to find big bore kits for them. And a little side story, we found a way back in my day to put a CT70 top end on the Z50. So now it's become a Z70, and we had an answer for the Trail Hoppers. And Yamaha's GT60 and Kawasaki, I think it might have been called a KE90 or something like that. But all those little mini bikes, we were racing before any of us knew we were racing. That's just how we did it, and hopping up those mini bikes and hitting the trail systems around our place. How can you beat that? That's the greatest times ever to be alive. It wasn't high pressure motocross. It's just a bunch of punk kids trying to outdo the other punk kid. That's what mini bikes is all about.
I think they said racing started as soon as the second mini bike was created.
That's great. I'm going to quote you on that.
Don't
That's
quote me.
exactly
I
right.
heard it somewhere if I've gotten it right. I would love to hear who actually said it first, but yeah. So
Absolutely.
that
You know,
QA QA, is that a straight pipe on that one?
it is, and that's only because, for one simple reason, the straight pipe. There you go. That's a good picture of it. The straight pipe is because a stock NOS, new old stock muffler for a QA50 is what we call in the business a unicorn product. You won't find it. And if you do, major bucks, okay? So all of my 50s and all of my mini bikes for that matter, we're not trying to build Mecum auction $10,000 mini bikes. We're trying to build a cool mini bike so we can ride them. And we ride them at the motocross races. We ride them at mini bike events. We ride them anywhere, parades, anywhere a person might like to see the vintage Hondas. So I had to makeshift some sort of an exhaust system on it. And
Sure.
And to your point on the straight pipe, my QA50 is a little loud coming into the parking lot. It is. Back on a stock QA50, that would be considered the first electric bike for the adult RV market because it was so quiet. You could take that off the back of your motorhome and ease around a campground and not bother anybody. Nobody was offended back then that you rode a QA50. It wasn't like a Harley Davidson coming down the highway, you know, with straight pipes on it. And so that's kind of my point about the straight pipe on my QA50. I would prefer to have a stock muffler on it, and I just don't have access to one yet. But if I find one, I'll quieten mine down. But they really were, that bike was designed kind of for an adult to run around the neighborhood and not offend anybody. And all those Honda mini bikes were, but the QA50 in particular. So that's the story on the straight pipe.
You called it a unicorn item, but I think the problem really is not so much that it's a unicorn; it's made of unobtainium. Isn't that really the problem?
Unobtainium. It is an unobtainium unicorn product. It is, and and when you find one, even if it's a rusted out piece of junk on eBay, it'll be $1,000. So that's all right. My straight pipe will work. Yeah.
I'm going to start looking around. Actually, since I got back into mini bikes myself a few years ago, everything catches my eye now. I don't seem to be able to shy away from anything. So I'm kind of keeping up on all these things.
Absolutely.
This is the time of our show where we're going to do some announcements, and we've got an AMSOIL promotion we're going to be doing. And as most people know, I am an independent AMSOIL dealer. And I am going to run a video next from Rob Hilditch. Rob is a distributor dealer above myself. Mike LaPierre, who is a producer of this show, is a dealer above me. And when you sign up either under Rob or Mike or myself, you know, you get all three of us helping you. But any referral fees comes from AMSOIL. It doesn't come from the customer. You know, we get profit sharing directly from AMSOIL. You get, as the customer, the cheapest price possible, and we win. So it's a win-win. Helps support this podcast. So without any further ado, let me run that promotion. Stand by.
Okay, I've been an AMSOIL dealer for close to 50 years now. Mike and Ben are also AMSOIL dealers. AMSOIL was the first 100% synthetic oil to be AI approved back in 1972. That oil is still available, same ingredients that I make back in 72 as it is now. It still passes all the new qualifications and everything. An oil that's good for 25,000 miles in 1 year, gives you better gas mileage, longer fuel life, longer engine life, pours at 60 below zero. It's an all-season oil. Makes your engine run 20 to 50 degrees cooler. But for this broadcast, we're going to emphasize the benefits of the small engine oil. Now, people are asking, why do I need a small engine oil? The small engine oil is high in zinc. These older mini bikes, they have cams, lifters, rockers in it, and they need zinc. Zinc was a lubricant. All the new oils don't have zinc in them because of the old 2 sensors and stuff like that. So we have a small engine oil available for you. Some of you want a 10W40. If you have a clutch in the bike, you want a motorcycle oil that's clutch compatible. But just for the ones with a difficult clutch, the small engine works perfect. AMSOIL Oils has a great product for the ethanol problem. A lot of these bikes, the tank of gas might last you a month. So you want to add something to the fuel for the ethanol problem. And AMSOIL has a great program where you can sign up as a preferred customer under Mike or Ben, and you get to buy the products directly from AMSOIL, save 25%. You order a case of oil, you save $50 on a case of oil. Or if you just want one of the AMSOIL catalogs that tells you all about the AMSOIL products, and in the catalog, doesn't matter what product you're talking about, we have the prices right there, what the retail price is and what the preferred price is. We show you what the price is and how much you save. Anybody that orders $75, $100 worth gets free shipping. And there should be a link down below that you can click on with Ben's Zettel number and all that. And on that link, you can either get a free catalog or sign up as a preferred customer and buy directly from AMSOIL, have it shipped right to your house, and save 25%. And you don't have to buy a full case. You can buy 2 bottles of that, 1 bottle of this, mix or match, you do whatever you want. But it's a great way to buy the product, great way to save money, and get a big discount. And by you buying the product, it helps cover the cost of putting on this show.
Thanks for that, Rob. I appreciate that. And if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer those questions.
I'll jump in just for a second and comment on that. Not to drift off into my vintage motocross world, but I too use AMSOIL products exclusively in all of our race bikes. And these are Elsinores. And for those of you that are in the know, these 1974 CR125s and things like that, we have run the AMSOIL Dominator product for 3 years now with 0 failures. And we know how to mix that gas perfect. And 28-to-1 is our ratio on an Elsinore. And I'm running the same cylinder that I've been running since 2022 with no issues at all. And I also use the AMSOIL Dirt inside of our gearbox for our clutch and transmission oil. So I'm a big AMSOIL fan.
Well, the thing of it is, the research behind it is that it has a better heat dissipating property than most conventional oils. And and also I think there's a misnomer, because you can run the AMSOIL at a higher mix ratio, doesn't mean you have to. And, if you want a quality oil, it doesn't mean you have to run it at that 50-to-1 or the 100-to-1 that's advertised that you can. So as you said, you run your Elsinore at 28-to-1. We run the Snowmobiles 32-to-1. A lot of guys are concerned, you're going to foul plugs. Well, honestly, the cost of a plug versus the cost of, a piston or rod is a lot different. So I've always been, it's cheap insurance to run a few extra ounces of oil. And, it's to each his own. The research is there, though.
Oh, absolutely. We could do an entire show on how to properly lubricate your engine, and I won't delve into that. But there's a big difference between a 1974 air-cooled 2-stroke engine running 10,500 RPM than there is a modern-day 250cc KTM, whatever 2-stroke that's water-cooled. It's a different ballgame, and you have to know the difference. But let's move on to mini bikes.
Excellent point. I'm going to run the next video because this next one's got a really cool bike in it, if I'm not mistaken. And actually, all your videos had really cool bikes, if I'm being honest.
Oh, look. 1974. Now, before you purists get mad at me and start throwing negative comments at me, this is a 1974 MR50 custom painted to look like the Holy Grail, which would have been a 1974 CR125. This is my version of an MR50. It's not intended to be accurate in any way, except for the fact it is indeed a 1974 MR50. Other than the paint job, pretty much unmolested. Stock exhaust system, some custom paint and some custom styling, but that is what Honda gave us, is, get this, our first 2-stroke Honda mini bike. What made this bike so incredibly special was it had more power than the Z50 and the QA50. It had motocross styling. So, when you rode this as a kid, you really thought you might be Marty Smith someday. You really thought you was going to be a pro motocrosser when you rode this guy right here. So, but what made it super special? If you look on this handlebar right here, that's a real live clutch lever. This bad boy had a 3-speed manual transmission. Little Junior had to learn to ride a clutch. And that made this bike so awesome. Kids all over America were hopping these things up with DG heads and bigger suspension and trying to make them as fast as they could go. And out in California, they were racing the wheels off these things. Now, I personally did not have an MR50. I had gotten a little old by the time this bike had come out, and I had moved on. But this bike was only a 2-year model, 1974 and 1975. And in 1974, it was all red. And in 1975, it looked like a CR125, kind of like this one does, but it was all silver with a red top on it because that's the year the CR125 looked like that. So it was very much in tune with trying to get the little kids to appreciate the Honda Elsinore line, which this guy gets to be called an Elsinore just like the big boys did. So they were selling these things like crazy. Do you know this bike could have been bought for $300? That is amazing. I wish I'd bought 100 of them. But anyway, that is the MR50, 3-speed manual gearbox, 2-stroke engine, better suspension than our earlier 50s. Every little kid's motocross dream.
That is
Yes.
definitely cool the way you got it set up too.
Nice segue into the Elsinore 50, you know, and that was coincidental, by the way. But that bike is my pit bike at the races, and it's painted to look exactly like my 74 race bike does. That's why it looks that way. Purists get mad at me because they think I destroyed the motorcycle because it's not the original colors. Two types of people out in the mini bike world, guys. There's the kind of people like me that just want a cool mini bike, ride it around and make it, you know, look cool and be a good Honda and whatnot. And then there's the purist, and they get mad at you if it doesn't have the right knobbies on the tire, if it doesn't have the right spokes in it, or if it's, you know, it's got to be absolutely OEM Honda perfect. I annoy some of those people, but hey, my bikes are still here and they run. But that MR50, back to the Suzuki Trailhopper, the little combative thing we talked about, that MR50 would slaughter a Suzuki Trailhopper. So all my Honda boys were getting revenge by the time that bike comes out. And but yeah, that was kind of the first. It wasn't the first racing mini bike per se, but and Honda, as much as you want to try and say they created it to be a race bike, it wasn't really created to be a race bike as much as it was created to, because at that time, the CR125 was selling millions of bikes. Motocross was coming into America, you know, is coming into mainstream America with racers like Marty Smith. And Honda, back to our original conversation about the ads they run, they knew how to attack the kid market. So they gave us a 2-stroke Elsinore for all the kids. Well, as you can imagine, we didn't just take the bike and trail ride on it. It kind of created the mini class in motocross. And next thing you know, there's an MR50 or a 50cc class in the early 70s. And now all the hopped up Z50s and little 4-stroke mini bikes and everything, they're just getting slaughtered by that MR50. And of course, it wasn't long after that the other big manufacturers started manufacturing their own version of those things. And that has parlayed into one of the biggest markets in today's world, and that's 50cc motocross racing. And we'll talk more about that someday, but that MR50 started it all. So I'm real proud to have one.
That's a really nice looking bike the way you got it set up. I really, you know, back to the purist thing. Yes, there are people that prefer it that way, but you know what? There's room in the hobby for all walks of life and all levels of enjoyment. And, you know, I often really think about this. You know, I do enjoy restoring things, but at the same time, I really enjoy using them. And anytime I've had something that was really restored to a higher level, I go back to cars and trucks or tractors. I don't feel like I want to use them anymore. You know, I've painstakingly got the cast iron exhaust the right color, and I don't want to have to go back and redo it, you know. And then when you use stuff, it really impacts that. So I find, you know, especially in my snowmobile hobby, our club's mantra is we like to ride. And honestly, that's my mantra with mini bikes too. I want to just ride them. And And for those keeping score of my projects, don't you worry. One of these days, all 12 of them are going to be done at the same time. I promise.
Well, back to your unobtainium cliche, I was told about the topic you just discussed is our bikes are ridden, not hidden. That's what goes on out there. So that's what I tell people. My bikes are ridden, not hidden. And,
I like that. I like
that.
Yeah.
So I'll trade you that one for yours. And
all right.
But you know, in my world of racing CR125s right now, and I'm always on the lookout for a CR125 that I can save. And my definition of saving one is the same as a mini bike. I don't save it to look at it. I save it to bring back that memory for some child, or in my case, a CR125, an adult. We build them to ride them and get them back out there. And one of the silly things that I might have said, it's kind of like, rescuing an animal. You don't rescue an animal from one cage and lock it up in another cage. You rescue that animal and set it free and let it be a dog or a cat or a horse or whatever it might be that you're saving. I, in a silly way, think of Elsinores as living, breathing entities, and I save them, put them back together, and then hand them to somebody and say, now take that to the motocross track and race it. So our mini bikes are exactly the same way. I love to fix up a mini bike and watch some little 9-10-year-old kid's eyes light up that just has never experienced that. And, it's where it all began. And if you can get inside of a young man's or young girl's head with a mini bike, you can really sculpt their life from that day forward. And I hope someday that we get to do another show and discuss just that topic. But the mini preview would be that I'm of the belief, many of you will share my opinion, that you get a kid a good mini bike in the day and teach him how to ride, he's going to grow up a different kid than he would have had he not had that. And particularly in today's world where, everything from Xboxes and electronics and video games and cell phones have kind of taken over the occupation of our kids' brains. With my kid, I was real quick to say, no, we're gonna race mini bikes and do stuff like that. And it has molded him into an entire different person, thank goodness. And so I am a huge proponent for buying your kid a mini bike. I'm not was it Ralph Nader or whoever it was back in the day that no, mini bikes kill you and stuff like that. Now I'm a total believer that get your kid a mini bike, teach them how to ride responsibly, and let them grow from that. And if they're as fortunate as I have been, they'll still be riding or racing or just enjoying motorcycles of some interest, well into their adult years. And in my case, even beyond. So
it really teaches kids a great skill set, responsibility, also just how things work. You have to fix them. Chain falls out. Right. You have to figure it out. Right.
And I go back to my earliest days when I jumped on the Honda 50 and took off riding and went down, left the neighborhood, went into the woods. I finally found myself alone, and it was scary. Although it was thrilling, it was up to me to ride that mini bike. Nobody was sitting on the back with me telling me how to do it. I wasn't on a team where somebody could replace me real quick if I needed to be. Just me and that mini bike. And I had to figure out that little 3-speed gearbox. I had to know that first gear climbed hills and third gear went fast and second gear was somewhere in the middle. You do that. And then, of course, when the chain comes off or you have a flat tire, my father wasn't there to fix that. I'm not saying he wasn't there. I'm just saying he wasn't there to fix that. He was in a different environment. And he said, son, if you want that mini bike, you've got to know how to fix it. So guess what? At 9-10 years old, you're learning how to run tools. You're learning how to be productive in a world that will soon pay dividends emotionally and maybe even financially from learning how to work on your own bike, learning how to ride your own bike. And again, I parlay that into my current vintage motocross championships is that I'm sort of my own mechanic and I have to know things and I have to be able to fix things. And even though in the world that we're racing in, I do have a team mechanic who does a great job for us, but I kind of know how to do it too. It's not like I'm a modern kid today is like, Daddy, fix this. Or they hand the bike over to some dealership or somewhere to get it fixed at exorbitant rates, So buy your kid a mini bike, teach them how to work on it.
The value to their independence is immeasurable. And I really think that is key. The emotional balance that's created, the ability to problem solve, and that independence is all part of that. And so we've gotten in a world where people are afraid to give their kids independence. Something's going to happen to them, and we've got to get back to that basic mindset that kids can do. They can do it with guidance.
Exactly. And I'll say this, and I'm trying to be funny, but that's called a helicopter parent, by the way. And that helicopter parent, by definition, is one that just helicopters over their kid to a point it stifles their creativity or growth. Okay. So in my world, I call myself the king of helicopter parents. And that's because, and I have photos of this, maybe I'll show you someday, is when my kid goes out onto the track to race, and again, he's an adult now, I'm right there with him, beside of him. And I have pictures of us sailing over big jumps, and I'm kind of looking down on him. And that's my version of being a helicopter parent, is making sure he's riding that motorcycle right on the track. So.
Who's faster, you or Ryder? Oh, never mind. Let's go to that next video. We don't have to answer that question right now.
Yeah. Well, he is. By a lot.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the holy grail of Honda mini bikes. If you were one of the fortunate ones to have a 1973 Honda XR75, consider yourself a blessed child, my friend. Honda released this bike as technically their first motocross bike. It joined the likes of the 1973 Honda CR250M Elsinore, but this guy actually beat it to the market just a little bit. 4-stroke engine, 4-speed gearbox, good suspension, good brakes. This bike put motocross for kids on the map. This thing did to the mini bike class exactly what later in life the CR125 did to the bigger class. You would go to any motocross racing in California or anywhere in America, maybe even Europe for that matter, and look at the starting line of what would be the mini bike class, and there would be 40 of these 1973 XR75s on the gate side by side. Wow, what a dream motorcycle. I could explain to you all the technical information about it, but I'd have to give you a little prehistory on Honda's SL70, which was the precursor to maybe this. But Honda said, no, we're not going to copy the SL70. We're going to come out with a brand new motorcycle. And this is what they gave us. Man, I remember the day it hit the streets. Unfortunately for me, my personal life, I was still riding my gold Z50 around in 1973. And it would be 1974 before I personally would obtain one of these beautiful motorcycles. Again, the holy grail of mini bikes in 1973. Now, was it the best motocross bike for years to come? No. But this started the revolution, or the evolution, I should say, of mini bike racing. And this is what channeled to today's world. When you go to the starting gate in 2025 and you look at all those crazy kids riding those super fast mini bikes, this is where it began, right here. So, gotta respect this bike. You have to respect it. Folks, that brings our show to an end. What we're going to do is I'm going to make you a promise. I'm going to come back in the very near future, and we're going to do a much longer, much more in-depth with more mini bikes. This is just the beginning of my collection. I have a lot more, and I have friends that have even better. I'd like to talk about the Suzuki products, the Yamaha products, the Kawasaki products. I'd like to talk about the pull start products. Back when I was little, I'd look at the Sears catalog and dream of one of those mini bikes that had a pull start on it. There was a company named Rupp that made mini bikes. Indian made mini bikes. It's not just about Honda. Honda just capitalized on it in many ways, but the mini bike marketplace was absolutely huge in its very humble beginnings. And I hope to bring that back to you in a full podcast, and the ability to just explain the differences and who had them and who didn't in a much better way. So for that, I thank you. I hope you enjoyed my mini bikes, and man, I'll see you soon. I look forward to it. Thank you for tuning in with us. I think it should be told that we didn't really expect me to be on live tonight, so we don't have to stop here like that video kind of implied. We can go on and talk about things. And
no, you were expecting to be in Alabama today racing.
I was, and I did that yesterday and got that out of my system, and here we are. But you are correct. You know, I want to make sure that your viewers, if they have any questions or if they have any comments or anything about any of those motorcycles, if they saw anything weird or out of place, I'd love for them to bring it to my attention and give me a chance to offer up any information on why things are the way they are. So again, I'm trying my best to watch the questions, but if you see something or anybody has a question, I'm an open book and I would love to answer your questions for you.
Would it be fair to say you were brand loyal through and through?
I bleed red, and that's Honda red. But yeah, so why am I such a Honda fanatic? It's kind of silly in some ways, but because Honda was my first mini bike and my first taste of motorcycle world, there was that loyalty. Honda had dealerships that you could go into. It's hard to go into a Rupp dealership where I lived, or some of those other oddball mini bikes. The Honda was just so mainstream, so that kind of got my attention. But once I got onto the Z50, there was a kid named Jeff Ward who was racing Honda XR75s from California, and he went on to be a superstar motocross racer, household name in the motocross world, Jeff Ward. But he made that Honda XR75 famous. I wanted to be like Jeff Ward. So my next bike was a 1974 XR75. That kept me on Honda. Well, about the time Jeff Ward kind of become, so there's another kid from Southern Cal named Marty Smith came along, who was the most teenage idol ever in motocross, brought that CR125 to us, and it was game over. I was Honda to the bone from there, and I stayed on Hondas all the way through my amateur career, and I was blessed enough to get Honda support from the factory to continue my racing as a professional. And so coming through life, I went through Hondas with straight into the four-stroke revolution with the Honda CRF 450 lines and stuff like that. And so I've been a Honda guy to my dying end. But I did shift to KTM because I'm more loyal to a two-stroke than I am a brand. And as I moved into my KTM world to race hair scrambles and some things like that, my kid came along racing, and the next thing you know, he's riding for KTM and he's doing the KTM thing. So we get to the end of that maturity rate, and flashback to 2-3 years ago, it come time for me to get back to my roots and become who I really am. And that person is a Honda CR125 pilot. And that's where I've been doing ever since. So, to say I'm loyal to Honda, to a fault, my friend. I've ridden Hondas when I shouldn't have, and I've ridden Hondas in their glory days. So, yes.
That's just a good segue to my next video, because I want everyone to meet Kim Thomson. Now, I first met Kim when she provided some video footage through Mike LaPierre. She was at the Goffstown show in New Hampshire showing some of her bikes. And I wish I had put it on the podcast overlay, but she sent me an image of her garage, and I kid you not, it looks like a Honda dealership. She has just a world-class collection, but you're going to see a few of her videos here. So let me run that.
I look forward to it.
We're here up in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire, at the Vintage Mini Bike and Snowmobile Swap Meet show, and show you a few of my bikes. This is a 1973 Honda SL70. And we have also a 1973 XR75. And we have a 74 Honda XR75.
That was my bike, Ben.
And we go the little smaller guys here. This is a 1974 MR50. They call it the
That's
baby
what mine's
Honda.
supposed to look like.
And what's behind that? Is there a story behind that? Why they call it that?
Yeah, because of the the CR 125s, 250 Elsinores.
Sure.
They look just like this.
So a mini
bike,
version
and
of that.
They just made a mini version, so they called it a mini Elsinore.
Nice.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And this is the next year, 2 years that they made these bikes. This is a 74 model, also MR50. Then we have, in many people's opinion, the holy grail of a Honda mini bike collection. This is a 1986 Z50 RD, nicknamed the Christmas Special.
A lot of kids got those for Christmas, I'll bet.
I'm sure.
Is that why they call it that?
I think it was the time of year they came out. Rumor had it, or story has it, that these were given to Honda dealerships. Only so many. They only made so many of these bikes. It's very questionable on how many. Arguably, a lot of people just don't know really how many that they did make of these.
Sure.
But they did come out right around Christmas, so that's why they called it the Christmas Special.
Sure. And I'll bet it would be fun to see the look on a kid's face when they get this for Christmas.
Oh boy, I would have been.
You want to see a
pretty
smile from
ecstatic.
ear to ear.
For sure. Yeah.
But yes, please continue.
And this is the first year of Honda's Mini Trail, 1968. They made them in 2 color versions, the yellow, and then here we have the one in red.
Oh, nice. So one of each.
Yeah, one of each. That
Outstanding.
1968. This one's kind of a neat little, more of a rare bird. It's a very early production model. It was one of the first 100 made. And this was actually a factory error. They call this a slant guard because this guard was supposed to come straight across here for safety reasons, not to get burnt on this pipe. And a bunch of them came out of the factory and they just offset the hole a little bit on this side, and most of them got recalled. And if you didn't take it back to have it fixed, there's very few in existence that still have that slant.
Oh, so it's rare to see.
Guard. Yep.
And this other one has it correct?
And that one has it correct. That's straight
Gotcha.
across.
So it'll give you some protection from that muffler.
Yeah.
Now, did you ride these as a kid? Do you have memories of bikes?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's what got me into collecting.
That's why you're doing this today?
Yep, yep.
So what was your first mini bike?
My first mini bike was that, the 74 MR.
The Elsinore.
That little 50. Yeah,
Wow.
that was my first.
The same, the very bike, or is that?
No, not this very
There was one
bike,
like
but
this?
One like this, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's what it all started for
yeah,
you.
that's where I started, probably about 10 years ago, really getting serious about
Collecting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Great retirement hobby.
Yeah.
Met a lot of great people doing it. So yeah, it's been a good time.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Nice
Yes,
to meet
it was very nice to meet you.
you. All right.
So a little
I like
correction.
her.
Yeah, she's a great person. That was the Pittsburgh, New Hampshire show, not the Goffstown. I made a mistake there.
I see.
But Kim has an awesome collection, and I hope to have her on the podcast and do a little more show and tell with some of her bikes.
I see that. Yeah. So her bikes are absolutely beautiful, and they are very correct. You know, she's going to cater to the purist, and I wouldn't be allowed to be around those bikes because I'd have them all scratched up. You know, and yeah, you could line my bikes up right beside her bikes, and though they're the same, yeah, mine are kind of rough.
Yeah.
But so am I. So, but what a beautiful set of motorcycles she had. And I know all those bikes. I was really glad to see her MR50s. So you could see, for those of you that may not know, what period correct MR50s really do look like. I was trying to explain in my video the red one versus the silver one.
Right.
And she did a nice job explaining that. But that 1974 XR75 she had brought tears to my eyes. That was my version of the bike. And I would love to have one of those someday. Yeah.
Probably going to go across the auction block one of these days. Just keep watching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you prefer to buy one restored or do the work yourself?
It depends. On the smaller of the mini bikes, like the Honda Z50s and the QA50s and even the MR50s, it's pretty, I won't say it's easy, but you can restore one with less effort than, say, a CR125 or a modern, or not a modern, but an Elsinore of some sort. Parts can be a little difficult to find for those bikes. And so, a shameless plug, I hope you don't mind, but this t-shirt I just noticed I happened to have on, that was coincidental in many ways, is my main part supplier for those Honda 50s and my Elsinores and even my race bikes, and that's remx.com, re-mx.com. A gentleman named Dan Gray owns that company, and he's as much of an enthusiast about mini bikes as you and I are, and he would be a great person to have on our show someday and let him tell you some of the, because he knows all the nuances and stuff about each of these bikes. But anyway, Dan and I are always talking about, how easy it can be to restore some bikes versus other bikes. And the QA50s are not as difficult as you think to get back running again. I have one on the bench right now that I'm trying to bring back to life again. And whereas those last two Z50s she showed, those are special motorcycles. Those should not be allowed to be ridden by anybody. Those are very special bikes. The Chrome Z50, by the way, it really didn't outnumber any other 50 under the Christmas tree as they were discussing per se. But that bike's very rare and very special. And it's only special in the fact that it's rare, and Honda made that for, I think it was only 1 year bike. It was a very special edition of the Honda Z50. And the fact that she has one that nice, that's a very special bike too. But back to your point, would I rather restore or find a freshie, so to speak? Oh, I'll take a freshie all day long if I can find it from somebody that understands or doesn't understand what they have. But you're not going to find a primo Honda Z50 or a QA50 or an SL70 or any of those two XR75s you've seen without paying a premium if it's a nice, solid, well-kept motorcycle. If I could segue into something, I was at the AMA Vintage Days, which is the largest vintage swap meet in the country. And there you can take your mini bikes and ride them around. And there's, I think this past year, there's 72,000 people at this show. And we go there to race the AMA National Championships. And I took my SL70. And the reason why you didn't see a clip on my SL70, which was one of the earlier ones, 1971, yellow SL70, was because it's gone. And the reason why it's gone was because I was riding around the pits at the AMA Vintage Days, and a guy approaches me and says, "Hey, Jerry, are you attached to that SL70?" And I said, "Well, I've had it for about 35 years, but no." He says, "Would you sell it to me?" I said, "It's really not for sale, but everything has a price, right?" And I said, "But I am not going to give you a deal on this bike. This is my SL70. I've had it for 1,000 years, and I'm not going to give you a deal." And he goes, "Well, what's your number?" He says, I said, "I don't have a number. You get my attention, we'll talk." So he tells me, he says, $2,500. I said, "Man, you're not even close." I said, "But I'll tell you this. When I left my house and I was loading my SL70 into the trailer, I had a number in my mind, because anytime I take the bike out, I always have a number in my mind. And when I come back and I said, "Yeah, you're not even close." And he says, "Well, would you take X number of dollars?" I think it's $5,000 for it. I said, "Now you're talking to me." I said, but you have to buy it now, because if you give me 15 minutes, I will change my mind. I promise you." The guy reaches in his pocket and he has just a stack of $100 bills. And that's how they are at Vintage Days, by the way, at the AMA Vintage Days at Mid-Ohio, near Columbus, Ohio, at late July. This guy says, "No, I'm going to buy it from you right now." And I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell you my real number." And my real number was $4,500. And I'm not going to take advantage of you or take an extra $500 because you said so. Guy whips me out $4,500, hands it to me. I don't know the guy's name, guys. Anybody's watching this? I have no idea who he is. So if you're watching, call me. He gives me $4,500, gets on my SL70. It's covered in dirt. The chain's loose. It probably needed the oil changed. And he says, "No, I want that bike because that was my first bike. It was a 1971 yellow SL70. And he says, "I've been going around here watching all these guys' bikes." And he says, "I've seen them." And this is kind of going back to what you said about fully restored or a little rough. He goes, "I've gone around, I've seen all the fully restored ones, and you don't know if they're good bikes or not. He says, I've been watching you for 2 days ride this bike. I didn't realize he'd been stalking me, Ben, and he'd been running around for 2 days. He says, I've been watching you run around on that SL70, and I told my partner, if he hasn't blown that SL70 up in the second day, I'm going to go buy it from him. He hands me the cash. I put it in my pocket, and before I can shake his hand and say thank you, he's gone. I don't know his name. He never got the title. I never wrote him an invoice or a bill of sale. He took my bike and he left. And, the only happy ending is I had a bunch of cash in my pocket for a while. But that's how some of these swap meets are at these mini bike shows. And if she took any of her bikes to AMA Vintage Days, she would get premium pricing for those bikes. I mean, if she was wanting to sell them, she doesn't strike me as somebody that's really trying to sell it. But Bring a Trailer, Mecum Auction, and other outlets like that for selling bikes.
You said the magic words, though. That was my first bike.
Oh, 100%. And that's who you're looking for, And
I read that all day long on the posts about old bikes or whatever. I had that bike, or I want that bike because I had that bike, and it's really, that's what fascinates me. And that's what I really enjoy about seeing bikes and talking to the people. This next clip we're going to run is actually another brand that I'm very fond of, the Gilson brothers brand of mini bikes. They made bikes for Montgomery Wards, and they also marketed them as Gilson, and also the parent company, Alice Chalmers. You can still see some bikes that were branded Alice Chalmers. I really think these are really well-engineered bikes, and they're really cool. I've gotten several projects going, and I've got my own thoughts about whether I would want a restored bike or one to fix, and we'll talk about that on the flip side. Let me run that video here. Did you happen to catch that one in the back seat?
And my first thoughts was that's a fairly luxury automobile to have that mini bike crammed in the back. I was looking at the interior for tears and rips, you know. If that had been shoved in the back of an old Ford Bronco somewhere, I wouldn't have worried about it. But yeah, that was really
a friend, Greg Castillo, he said that one of his buddies picked it up, or I think is what he told me, and he had a car transporter, and so they had to find a place for it. So went in the back seat.
Hey, good place as any for a mini bike, you know. And yeah, I had two thoughts on that film. Was first of all, you know, if you had run that film in 1968, kids' heads would explode to watch that video. And you run it in 2025 among that same age bracket of kids, they'd be like, what are those things? You know,
yeah,
they look like mini bikes, but are they? And, you know, so my point is mini bikes today versus mini bikes then is an entirely different program. It's a different mindset. It's different in so many ways. And, you know, I think back to the pull start mini bikes, which every one of those qualified for, and some were nicer than others. My idea of a pull start mini bike, again, came out of a Sears catalog. The only thing I can tell you is it had probably a little Briggs and Stratton motor on it. And when you pushed the rear brake, it had a pedal or something that pushed against the tire. If you remember, what was that technically called?
Yeah. Scrub brake.
A scrub brake. Thank you. As a scrub brake, you know, and, you know, and I remember riding those as a kid, but I never had one. But in today's world, it's actually a thing. There is a cult, if you will, of kids who go and build these pull start mini bikes and race them. And it's not a big thing, but they don't really understand what they're doing, Ben. They don't understand that they're going back in history. They're not thinking like you and I and probably our viewers are. They're not trying to save another bike. They're just building these contraptions out of these pull start bikes and finding the fun in them again. And, so, you know, I'm going to have to build one of those after watching that film. I need one in my collection, just one for sure.
Definitely. I encourage you to find one of those big wheeled versions of the Gilson. They're really a large frame bike, and so adult fits on very nicely.
Yeah, and I don't know if what I'm about to say to you is the same thing. I was in it was either a Lowe's or some type of home building supply store, maybe a tractor supply store, and they sold these modern versions of these pull start mini bikes that were, you know, they weren't built for a kid. They were built for a grown man to run around a job site on, apparently. Yeah. And those things are showing up all over the place now with these big fat tires on them. And, you know, and I see kids popping wheelies on them and thrashing them out just like we were thrashing out QA50s, you know, we were trying to ruin them.
The truth is that we need to incorporate our youth. And, you know, the youth today, they go down to Harbor Freight, they buy that Predator engine, you know, they want to just throw it on something and go. You know, they're not interested in that it's not the correct engine, or, you know, you don't have the correct brand tires on that thing. They want to ride. And I think that's really, we're missing an opportunity to bring our youth into the fold by being so exclusive. And, you know, there's a place for that. But at the same time, you know, what I really think we need to do is to really meld, you know, the time, you know, period that we grew up and give that experience to the youth today. You know, it may look different, you know, it may not have a Tecumseh, it may not have a Briggs, but at the same time, I think we can do a lot to really bring the youth along and give them some benefit of our experiences and our memories.
I 100% agree. You know, I think one of the things that pulls on my heartstrings the most is, in a sad way, if you will, is that the modern kid, you take and they're starting so early now. There's, you know, with the invention of the Strider bicycles, pedalless bicycles that have little electric assist motors on them and stuff, you can start your kid riding a two-wheeler at 2 years old now. That's a little creepy. I'm guilty of it. That can happen. But with that said, you know, most of us that are in our age bracket, we didn't really start riding mini bikes till we were 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. These kids are starting today at just pretty much out of a diaper, they're riding bikes of some sort. And it's lost a little bit of its, it's lost a lot of its, some of the things we were talking about earlier about just building those building blocks of kids working on their bikes, learning about mini bikes, the independence. And this is why I say that. And this is really sad, folks. I don't mean this to be a Debbie Downer, but these kids today, my kid is 100% guilty of it because of me. We're buying them mini bikes at 4 years old, and we're taking them straight to the racetrack. And they become little miniature professional motocross racers. They bypassed the whole point. And my kid, by the time he was 17 years old, did not know how to ride a motorcycle. Let me be very clear, folks. He knew how to race a motorcycle. One of the fastest kids you'll ever meet couldn't ride a motorcycle for crap. What does that mean? That means he didn't know how to go enjoy the bike. He didn't know how to just jump on a bike and go out into the woods and ride. Everything was a fire drill. Everything was a race. Everything was this. He didn't know how to work on a bike. Why? Because I was his factory mechanic. You know, this kid goes to races and he's got a dad who's a factory mechanic working for him. He goes to the starting line and his job is to go faster than all the other little Johnnies out there on the track. And that's all he had to do. And what did we do? We bred a pro motocrosser, but we didn't breed a true motorcycle rider. So the last few years of my life has been reversing this bad parenting that I did as a racer. And now we can put him on a motorcycle and he and I and others can just go trail ride. We can just go around. And this is so liberating to him. He's feeling the liberation that I was feeling as a 10-year-old. He's now 20 and he's just now starting to grasp it. And so here's the fun part, folks. I looked out the window in my living room the other day and I saw all 4 or 5 of my vintage mini bikes going around the yard, hitting jumps that were made with they took a concrete block and laid a board up on it and made a ramp out of it. And they're jumping these extremely rare mini bikes with no suspension off this jump. And it's him and 3 of his friends. And I looked out the window and I go, yes, finally, they get it. This is what mini bikes are all about. It's not about going to the lineup. It's about going out in the yard and thrashing them things out. You know, I didn't care. If you crash it, we'll fix it.
You've been holding out on me. I want that video. I want to run some of that on my page.
I promised to get it for you. And I was actually thinking the same thing you were, like, why didn't I film that? You know,
yeah.
But I was just sitting there in amazement, you know, because, you know, as many races as we win or lose together, none of that would have ever happened had I not had that little Honda Z50 just running around the neighborhoods pretending to be as good as these 4 kids are.
Exactly.
You know, I was just dreaming of trying to be that good, you know.
I got to do a couple quick shout outs and then we're going to wrap up. All right. So first, I'd like to give shout out to Mike LaPierre's podcast. He does the Muscle Car podcast. It's a show and tell podcast. He features a lot of great vehicles from around the country, different shows and whatnot. And it's Wednesday nights. He also does on Thursdays the Vintage Snowmobile Lovers podcast. And he's the impetus for why I do the Vintage Mini Bike Lovers podcast. And I want to thank Mike. He does a lot for me behind the scenes and sets me up with StreamYard. Also, I'd like to give another shout out to Joe Abadi, Vintage Motocross Q&A every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific and 9 p.m. Eastern time. Joe promotes my show week to week, and I want to, pay him back in kindness. He's a great mentor, and I've been working on different ways to format the show, and Joe has been a wealth of knowledge. So I do thank you, Joe, for all your assistance and support in promoting my podcast. Jerry, final thoughts?
Yeah, you know, a couple things. I want to parlay off of your gratitude to Joe Abadi. I share that same gratitude. He's been a major proponent in our motocross team in support of that. And when Joe and I talk privately behind the scenes, we're not really talking about vintage motocross. We talk about mini bikes. Joe's a huge mini bike fan, and he would be a great person to have on the show because he has history, and I love everything he's got to say about the mini bike world. But no, I would just like to tell you, buy your kid a mini bike and never sell it. And with that said, I want to show your fans the room that I'm in and what I have done with my son Ryder Mattox mini. If you don't mind, if you can just break the screen up. Okay, so we're in what I call the Ryder Mattox mausoleum. Yes, he's a very accomplished amateur motocross racer and has now won many national championships in the vintage world and blah blah blah. And yes, he's the same kid that did not grow up on a mini bike the way I did. On the back wall, you're seeing 2 KTMs hanging on the wall. One of them is a KTM Super Mini, which means it's a 105cc bike. And the other one was a KTM 85cc bike. Both of those have gone to Loretta Lynn's national championships to compete. As I rotate my camera around in the back corner, that is a Cobra 65 hanging on the wall. And in the foreground is a KTM 125 sitting on the ground. That's a modern bike. That's boring. Behind it is a Cobra, King Cobra 50 on the wall. And then as I come on around, yes, that's one of my Elsinores sitting there. But above the Elsinore is the Cobra 50 Junior. That's a 4 to 6 year old bike that he went to Loretta Lynn's on. And then as I come on around and we get past the other KTM, there's the classic, probably the single most popular mini bike ever invented, the Yamaha PW50 on the lower rack. But way up high is a brand of bike you may not know about. That's called an Osset. And it was one of the first electric bikes to come out in around 2008. It's a trials bike, but before the electric craze took over, Ryder was racing that Osset in off-road events. So, my point, buy your kid a mini bike, don't sell it, put it on the wall and keep it forever. So his next generation can also see what the mini bikes are and keep going. As I'm coming around, yet another KTM race bike on the wall. And then last but not least, another KTM mini bike there. So unlike my father, he did not save any of my mini bikes. I had to go back and rebuild new ones to mimic those mini bikes. The gold Z50 that you're seeing was my first mini bike, but the gold Z50 I have today is not my first mini bike. But I think it's fair to say that all the mini bikes you saw me ride today were obtained 40 years ago. I did not buy these in modern times, Ben, and restore them. I bought them back in the 80s when I was really serious about trying to recoup some of the mini bikes I had and some classic bikes. Every one of my mini bikes, I probably paid a few $100 for. It was before the internet. It was before this whole thing broke out about vintage mini bikes having any value at all. And so I only wish I'd bought more at the time. But, so a lot of people don't know it. I'm a huge mini bike fan. And thank you for having me on your show. It's been a great pleasure. And like I said, I'm building a new QA50 for you soon, and I'll get that video for you for the kids riding. And then I'd like to segue into what modern mini bikes look like in the current present time that we live in. And the sad part that I hate ending a show on is that most of the motocross races at present day are canceling pit bikes for insurance reasons. We have come into a world where we can't ride our mini bikes at amateur motocross races anymore. That has to stop. We have to fight that and turn that around. And I'm going to head that fight. And, so it's just something that we should know is that the whole mini bike market and the whole reason why there is a sport of motorcycle racing, whether it be motocross and or road racing, it started with these mini bikes. And it's still starting at the mini bike level. Though I started in 1972 on a mini bike, these kids that are starting in 2020 on a mini bike are not going to get the same fair shake that we did if we as parents don't step in and fight for our rights to have our kid have a mini bike. And you know what, folks? Not every kid has to race motorcycles. Not every kid has to take mini bikes to the stardom level. Just have a mini bike and enjoy the dumb thing on a farm, out in your neighborhood, ride it wherever you can, whatever it takes. Don't try and turn every little Johnny into a pro motocrosser. Turn him into a mini bike rider first, and everything else will come natural.
Well,
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, Ben.
I'm all for you on that one, because I'm really surprised that the American Motorcyclists Association really isn't lobbying on that point in and of itself. Their whole organization was founded on preserving the freedom of motorcycling, and that grassroots efforts is going to be necessary. People getting directly involved. It really would be unfortunate if the suits did this in, because it's really would be an end of an era, truly. With that, I'm going to close down the show. I really do appreciate, Jerry, you being here. So thank you very much. I want to again thank all the supporters of the show and the viewers especially. Thank you very much.